I think as we learn more about the gut microbiome, about genetics, we'll be able to really say, okay, well, you really need to be eating these types of foods based on your genetics and your microbiome. And then we're going to test you again in 6 months and see if there's any changes and what works best for you.
Namaste. You're listening to the Sivana podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SivanaSpirit.com, the best place to shop for unique clothing, spiritual handcrafted jewelry, healing gemstones, and fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now, here's your host, Brett Larkin.
Hello, Sivana family. I hope you're having a beautiful day. Thanks so much for coming to the show, and maybe reflect on what you have eaten today so far, because today our focus is the digestive system. We are talking with Dr. Mona Ezzat. She is a board-certified family physician and board-certified integrative and holistic medicine physician with extensive training in functional medicine. And if you don't know what any of those terms mean, like functional medicine, that's one of the first things I ask her. She's been practicing for over 17 years in very diverse settings. She's practiced as a doctor at a Navajo Indian reservation, working as an on-site doctor at Facebook as well. So a very broad range of experiences. And her passion is helping her patients find the root cause of their health challenges and regaining their vitality through lifestyle measures. With Mona today, our focus is going to be, as I mentioned, on the digestive system. We often hear that all disease begins in the gut, but what does that really mean? So today we're going to work with her to learn how the ecosystem of our gut works, from our mouth all the way down to our colon. She's going to answer common questions for us about digestive health, like why do we crave carbs when we're stressed? Why does caffeine wreak havoc on our digestive system, or does it? What are common problem foods that she sees irritate the lining of the gut for the majority of her patients? We're going to learn about all of that today. One of the things I most appreciated after this interview was how much better I was able to really visualize the ecosystem of my gut. So I hope you guys enjoy that too. Remember, if you are getting value from the podcast, the best way to show your love and support is to make a purchase on SivanaSpirit.com, an online shop for yoga clothing, healing jewelry, and unique spiritual fair trade gifts. Remember, just use that coupon code PODCAST30 for 30% off anything your heart desires. Now, let's get into the interview. Mona, thank you so much for being with us and for coming on the show. The first thing I want to ask you about is that you've worked in Navajo Indian reservations and also as the on-site doctor on Facebook. I can't even imagine like two more different atmospheres to do your work in.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, and I'm really excited to be here and to share any kind of information I can. Yeah, those are very, very different experiences that I had. So when I finished residency at the University of Michigan, I took a year and did something called locum tenens work, where you kind of travel around and you help fill into places that are either underserved or a doctor is out for leave and they need extra help. So I had the great fortune of kind of traveling in different places around the country. And one of those locations was the Navajo Indian Reservation in northern Arizona. And I really loved that experience. I mean, it was really life-changing in a lot of ways because the chief of our clinic was very well known and respected in the Navajo community. And I had asked her if I could accompany her to any events that would happen in the community. So there was a fire dance that was held for one of the ladies who was diagnosed with cancer. And this was broadcast on the radio, the Navajo radio. So, 200 to 250 people had shown up for this event in her honor. And it was a full dance, and they had a bonfire in the middle and costume and kind of this full energetic spirit that was being brought to help her to heal. And so it was really something very different from my training in which, the power of community and of having other people wishing you well, how important that is to our overall health. And now, the science is really showing that to be true. And then you kind of fast forward into being an on-site doctor at Facebook, which was also a really great and fun experience because I was likened that to being kind of a doctor in a small town because you have so many employees in that area. And and we're there to provide primary care and to connect with people. And it was a full service clinic that we have. So it was psychologist and physical medicine and acupuncture, nutrition. So it was a really great opportunity to connect with patients. And then again, being on site, other people would sort of tell others if they were getting better or how they experienced their health care at the clinic, and kind of, again, power of community to bring more people in and to really get the help that they needed at that clinic.
That's interesting that you see that theme of community in two such different atmospheres.
Yeah, very different. But, it's the teams would be really tight that you would see at Facebook. And so we would often see people who were on the same team who would talk to one another and were having kind of similar health struggles, or one had gotten help through acupuncture. And so they were also coming in to get checked out. It was, different settings, of course, and different kind of spectrums of experience that people would have and connection. I think probably the biggest difference would be the connection to the earth. Like on the Navajo, they have this tendency where they ask people when there's a change of season. Like I was there in the fall, the beginning of winter, and they would tell me, like, you should go and introduce yourself to the snow and the change of the season. Like just go out and be in the winter time and introduce yourself to the season. This very big connection that I felt with the earth and with nature and the change of nature. Whereas, being on a computer most of the day and in California, where we don't get quite as many different change of seasons that's abrupt like that, you don't really necessarily get that connection with nature on a regular basis unless you're making the effort to do it.
That's really interesting. I want to dive into that more in a bit. I know you're certified in integrative and holistic medicine. Can you tell me and the listeners just a little bit about what that means? Like, does that mean that you're working with people as their primary care doctor, but then recommending they do things like acupuncture? Or, how does that really break down in terms of that specialty?
Yeah, so I'm board certified in family medicine and then integrative medicine, and I'm actually on the process of working on my certification in functional medicine. So what I see all of those as many tools for helping people find the right path of wellness for them. So, if someone comes in with high blood pressure, sort of the traditional way of treating high blood pressure is to talk about medications and maybe a little bit about lifestyle. From an integrative or functional medicine standpoint, we ask, well, why does this person have high blood pressure? Why do you specifically have high blood pressure? It's a very personalized approach. And so it's, looking at your genetics, some biochemistry pathways. What are your stress levels looking like? How deep is your sleep? Are you restoring your sleep? What are the factors? And, going even into gut health, how that relates to overall levels of inflammation. And then using those tools to help people kind of redirect their health back on track. And it doesn't, I use all the tools available. So if someone has high blood pressure and needs to be treated, they're going to start on a medication while we're working on the other paths to try to help their body to reset and bring the blood pressure down. And they may eventually be able to go off of the medication. So I see it as really kind of like lots of tools to be equipped with. And being able to personalize that to a patient and what their health struggles are.
Yeah, I think so many people have the complaint of our modern healthcare system is that they just get so little time with their doctor, right? And there's this idea that the root cause of whatever might be causing the issue never really even gets looked at because we're just treating symptoms. So this specialty that you're focused on seems like it's really bringing just a holistic viewpoint to the whole person, which I think is so, so important. And I know when looking at the whole person, one of the emerging fields that you're going to talk to us today about is the gut and the flora, the microbes in our gut. Tell us why the gut is such a passion of yours.
Yeah. So, it's Hippocrates said it years ago that all disease begins in the gut. There is a lot of information that we're still learning. We're still even early in the process of understanding gut health and what contributes to that. So the microbiome is made up of bacteria, yeast, viruses that are inherent in our body, and they come in at birth. When you're delivered, you kind of get your mother's bacteria, and then it builds from there depending on your exposures and your food and everything else that you're experiencing. Keeping So the gut sort of dictates a lot of things that happen in the body and integrates with different systems. So your immune system is a big part of how well your body is going to stay healthy over time. And we have something called gut-associated lymphoid tissue that are right in the gut area. And there's a very small separation between what's inside the gut and what happens with that immune system. The immune system's job is there to kind of monitor and watch for different things that could potentially cause you to get sick and mount a response. So, and then your gut is connected to your brain. There's a gut-brain axis that we're still, again, learning about, that the gut tells the brain, sends certain signals to the brain sends a signal via the vagus nerve back down to the gut. So there's a lot of great books that have been written. Dr. David Perlmutter has written some great books about brain, and he's written a lot of different components to help people understand how important food and brain health is and how the microbes are important.
Before you go on, tell us a little bit more about the vagus nerve, because I know for myself and Sivana listeners, as people who meditate, we're often really curious about the vagus nerve, and we learn that it plays a crucial role in regulating our heart, right? And our anxiety, our stress levels, and that it has something to do with meditation as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I'm hoping I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, no, you're right on track. So yeah, the vagus nerve is really a big component of our parasympathetic nervous system. So our nervous system is divided into sympathetic, your fight or flight nervous system, and then your parasympathetic, the rest and digest part. And so the vagus nerve regulates inputs to the heart, input to the gut for peristalsis, for movement, and then there's a feedback loop with the sympathetic nervous system. So when we meditate and we do deep breathing and we do visualization work, all of these things help to tone the vagus nerve to get your parasympathetic nervous system back on track.
And that's your rest and digest functions, right? So housekeeping activities, immune function.
Exactly. And we're really designed to be short bursts in the sympathetic nervous system and most of the time in the parasympathetic nervous system. So we're really supposed to be kind of rest, digest, take in information, accumulate information in our environment, sort of in that space that's a little more calm. And then when we need to react, we just are supposed to have these short bursts of the sympathetic nervous system to react to what we're exposed to, and then go back into the parasympathetic. And what we're seeing, and more, is that most of us are living more in the sympathetic and very little in the parasympathetic, which is, again, why we see lots of issues coming up with digestive issues, because you can't really rest and digest if you're sitting in that sympathetic fight or flight response most of the time.
And this is something I don't think I fully understood, which is that you're saying the vagus nerve has a direct connection, you said, to peristalsis. Can you tell listeners what that is, just in case they don't know?
Yes. So peristalsis is the muscular movement of the gut to move things through as you digest food. So the muscles of the intestines are circular. And so if you think of like squeezing a tube of toothpaste and trying to kind of move that toothpaste out, that's sort of how the muscles contract. And so you need to be able to move things through so that food doesn't sit too long into the gut, that the microbes are able to do the work, and then it moves down through the colon and gets excreted appropriately, that you're not holding on to toxic things, that there's not, potential issues that will develop into what we call dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of the bacteria if you're not really moving the food through appropriately.
Totally. I always visualize it as like, on the Discovery Channel when you see the snake eat a mouse or something and then it like down its body. Yeah. But what you're saying here is interesting, is because you're saying that it's stagnation that's sort of causing some of these problems. Can you talk more about that? Is because I think there's some confusion. It's like we're talking about the gut, and I think we all know now it's like almost a cultural thing. It's like come to popularity now to talk about the gut and gut flora and how all of this is so important. But clarify for me and our listeners, like, is it that it's bad if your food like sits too long in one part of the gut, sort of like you were describing, like that peristalsis, the movement isn't happening? And how does that have to do with like that balance of what, I think it's an oversimplification, but to say like good and bad bacteria, and how does that keep everything moving? Like, what are all the actors in this play of digestion that's going on?
Right, right. Well, starting from, we always think about, and in functional medicine, that your digestion starts in your mouth. So you need to have good oral flora. So not having a lot of tooth decay, gum disease, because that changes the bacteria that are in your mouth that are going to affect the whole system. And then you need to be able to, you need to chew your food. You need to have enough amylase and saliva to help start to break that food down. And then kind of moving it through into the stomach, you need the appropriate amounts of hydrochloric acid to help you have the acid potential to break the foods down into components. And then you need your pancreatic enzymes as it's moving into the small intestine. And then it needs to move through the small intestine because ideally there shouldn't be too many bacteria in your small intestine. And that lack of peristalsis can actually lead into some more bacteria developing into the small intestine, which leads usually into something called SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So, as you're moving through the small intestine, and then you get to the colon where your bacteria are. The bacteria are looking for high fiber foods, the right components in those foods to help you break the food down, and for the microbes to stay fed and efficient and diverse in your colon, and then the peristalsis to move that waste out so that you're getting rid of everything that you need to. So all of those components of movement, enzymes, and hydrochloric acid and amylase and all these things need to be present, in addition to having a good varied diet, having lots of fiber in your diet, lots of different colors so you get the phytonutrients. The high fiber is important because it feeds actually into your bacteria in your gut, and provides, when they eat that fiber, they make something called short chain fatty acids, which help to keep your colon cells healthy. Some of those short chain fatty acids are important for the brain, like N-butyrate, for instance, is important for good brain health. So, all of those components of having a digestive tract that's healthy, that moves things through appropriately, that you have regular bowel movements and that they're formed and that they're daily, and that you're really kind of having the appropriate movement of the food through your system, and things are not stagnating.
And tell me a little bit more about this idea of the microbes and the microbes needing to be fed.
So we talk a lot, in the general public, we talk about probiotics and prebiotics. Prebiotics are sort of the foods that feed those bacteria, and the probiotics are the actual bacteria. And so most of this should be coming from food. Probiotics are great to use when you need them. If you have, like I was mentioning before, an imbalance of your bacteria, the dysbiosis, or you have an overgrowth of a bad bacteria in your gut, we may use a probiotic to just sort of reset and recalibrate the balance of the bacteria in the gut. And then we will use prebiotics to sort of feed those good bacteria. And that can be coming in the form of things like Jerusalem artichoke, which are sunchokes, or asparagus, or bananas, or fermented foods like kimchi, sauerkraut. These are the things that will sort of feed those good bacteria and provide that. But high fiber foods are another really important factor because our body can't break down that fiber quite as well, but the bacteria are really good at doing that. So they kind of feed off of that fiber that you take in, and then in turn produce byproducts that are really healthy for your body to stay in balance.
So it's kind of like you have to eat the fiber to give your bacteria a workout.
Exactly. Even, there's a great book called The Good Gut from two researchers at Stanford, and they talked about even breast milk. There's components of breast milk that doesn't really necessarily feed to the baby, but it's actually feeding the microbiome of the baby to get that microbiome developed and healthy to protect the baby from illness. So, even just from birth, we're ready to protect our bodies.
It's like there's this ecosystem alive inside us, this complex gut ecosystem, and it just keeps developing. And while this is fascinating, it's also terrifying because it just seems like it's so easy for that area of the body or for this ecosystem to get out of balance. Is that what you see with a lot of your patients?
Well, yeah, we see it mostly because of changes in lifestyle habits. Like if you're not eating a very varied diet with lots of different components of fresh, healthy foods mostly vegetables, some fruits, good amount of proteins, proper amount of fats for your body. If you tend to eat a lot of processed foods, or you're eating fast food, you're not really getting the nutrients that nature had developed for you to be eating. So if you're eating whole foods, natural, you have a kind of a leg up of getting all those good bacteria and keeping them healthy. And then other parts of it can be other lifestyle factors: stress, your sleep, how much movement and exercise you get, balance of other components in the body. Stress hormones are such a big component to keeping your gut healthy. So when we see patients, we focus in on asking specific questions for gut health. Are you having any gas or bloating? Do you have heartburn? Because it gives us idea of how well the digestive tract is working. And then we do a microbiome test through stool, and we look and we see, how much variety do you have in your microbiome? Are you actually digesting the macronutrients of proteins and fats, or is it not being digested? And then we look for signs for inflammation, of maybe your body doesn't tolerate certain foods that you might be eating a lot of, and it's causing some problems. So, it's not rocket science. It's not super complicated to do. It's really getting back to eating really healthy foods and then getting some help fine tune that. And that's really what we provide. We're sort of the coaches to help people fine tune their gut health.
What's the best advice you've ever gotten around diet and nutrition? And do you follow a particular diet?
I think that we're still in an evolutionary path of figuring out your personalized diet. I don't think there's one diet that's good for everyone. And I think I kind of look at my health as an experiment. Like if I'm feeling like my digestion is not quite as good, I'll keep track for a few days and sort of figure out what's changed and what should I kind of revert a little bit to help improve that. I think as we learn more about the gut microbiome, about genetics, we'll be able to really, and we're very close. I mean, there's a few different companies who are already doing this type of work, and it's pretty impressive, their results, that they can take that information and they can say, okay, well, you really need to be eating these types of foods based on your genetics and your microbiome. And then we're going to test you again in 6 months and see if there's any changes and what works best for you. I think that the information is going to become more specific as we learn from the studies. But
so instead of these like generic fad diets, we'll really get personalized info on the exact types of food and nutrients we need to be eating.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then one of the other guests I had on the show told me something that I also found terrifying, which is that you can eat all these healthy foods, like you can eat tons of kale and, whole foods, whole grains. But if the ecosystem in your gut isn't well balanced so that it can properly break down those nutrients, you're not going to be able to absorb any of the benefits of these great foods that you're eating. Is that true?
Yeah. So if you have leaky gut or you have dysbiosis in your body, you have a lot of inflammation in your gut, it's going to be really hard for you to really absorb the nutrients. Yeah. So that's where the microbiome testing can come in, because we pick up and see the degree of inflammation that's going on. We help people we usually also will test food sensitivities and look and see, are there certain foods that you're mounting an immune response to? If there's a lot of foods you're mounting an immune response to, that's another sign of a leaky gut. And so it's a lot of work of sort of getting the gut to settle down, helping to heal the gut lining and then repair the gut lining so that when you do eat these foods, you're getting the most benefit from them.
And when you're talking about all these tests and healing the gut lining, and I'm trying to visualize what's actually happening, because, do you guys use like teeny tiny cameras that you put in people so you can see what's going on? Or is this sort of like a trial and error approach where it's like, well, eat this and see how you feel and then try eating this? How do you start narrowing down even the different component parts of what's going on in the ecosystem?
Right. Well, so we do stool testing, and usually we'll have you do an analysis. So you collect stool at home for 3 days and then you send it to a lab and we get an analysis on the stool. For food sensitivities, it's through blood. So it's looking to see what your immune reactions are to different food panels through the blood, and to see what's provoking your immune system or what looks okay for you to be eating right now. And then it's a lot to do with how people are feeling. Like, for instance, if you have a lot of joint aches and joint pains, or you've been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis or severe osteoarthritis, there are certain foods like from the nightshade group, which are tomatoes and potatoes and eggplant, that can be more inflammatory for someone who has joint issues. So we'll ask you to take a break from those foods for a month to 6 weeks, and then slowly reintroduce those foods and see, does that seem to cause some inflammation in your body, or does it not cause any problems? For a lot of people, gluten and dairy in particular are really not easily digested for a lot of folks. So taking those foods out and taking a break for a certain period of time, 4 to 6 weeks, and then bringing them back in, what's the shift of health? I mean, people oftentimes will say, well, they take the break for the 6 weeks and then they bring the food back in and they really notice a difference. Like all of a sudden they're really tired, or their joints ache, or they can't think as clearly as they had before. So food is, as we say, food is medicine, but it's finding the right medicine for you, which is looking at this diet. And then again, going back to kind of the genetics and microbiome part of it, as we get more fine-tuned with that, then we'll have that component to even use that as a layer of understanding what's right.
I know this might not be the most beautiful or glamorous topic, but I feel like I have to ask you because I think, really trying to give listeners practical tips they can take away or take home. It seems like looking at your stool and what's going on there is a huge piece of understanding what's going on with your digestive health. So have you ever seen that book? I think it's like a children's book, but it's called like, What's Your Poo Telling You? Have you seen that book?
I haven't seen the book. I've seen the other one, but everybody poops.
Oh, no. So this one, I don't own it. I think I sort of want to. Can you walk us through, like, if your stool is very loose, right? Or perhaps you're having trouble going to the bathroom. Like, what's that telling you? Like, what does that mean? Especially if it's I know for many people, it's like very highly variable day to day. And there might not, like, it might seem like there's no rhyme or reason. Like, what are kind of like the biggest things you tell people to look for? Like warning signs or just sort of things to be aware of?
So, yeah, I mean, we do ask about consistency and about how often. So if people are having more loose stools, it can be a sign of not having enough digestive enzymes, not being able to, if that's a sign that the peristalsis is a little too fast. Sometimes they're having trouble absorbing fats. So fats are being excreted into the stool. That's causing it to be more loose as well. And it's a sign that the bacteria is not balanced. So again, kind of doing a probiotic to see how people feel with that. That seems to improve how well they're able to have a regular bowel movement. If you're constipated, it can be food sensitivities. It can be also not having enough hydrochloric acid, could be also enzyme related. Sometimes these are also signs that the small intestine is inflamed with this thing called SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And so that's something that if people are having a lot of gas and bloating, we may test for that. And then if you're seeing a lot of undigested food in your stool, then you're also having some problems with digestive enzymes, with maybe that's a food intolerance that your body just can't break it down and it just goes through into the stool. So it can tell you quite a bit about your gut health, kind of how regular you are and the consistency. And then you backtrack and you sort of shift a little bit on your diet and try to see if that helps.
That's interesting that the loose stool means that you haven't been digesting your food well enough. Did I understand that correctly?
For sometimes it can be for fats are not being digested well enough. And so the fats can kind of push through a little more quickly.
So what's the number one kind of food culprit you see causing problems for people? Is it dairy? Is it gluten? Like if people wanted at home to test out like one food group that, could be the troublemaker, like what are those?
Dairy would be number one. 2 would be gluten. Both of those can cause a lot of issues for a lot of people, but dairy in particular, most people have hard time digesting as adults, and it's so prevalent in our society, from cheese and yogurts and milk on a regular basis, that just taking a break for 4 to 6 weeks and to see how you feel. And then again, reintroducing it slowly after that period of time, and notice if you see a shift in your health in any way. It can be really, really amazing and a fun experiment to go through.
And do you recommend that people who are working with you keep like a food log and a stool log? Like if someone at home is like, you know what, I want to get a sense of what's going on in my gut. Like I want to understand if it's balanced or imbalanced, or, maybe what some of my food sensitivities might be. What do you recommend that they do?
Yeah, food diaries can be really helpful, and even just for 3 days, it doesn't have to be an extensive amount, but write down what you eat and then how you feel afterwards, and then maybe how you feel a couple of hours after you have that meal. Can give us a lot of clues as to not only for food sensitivity, but also just your metabolic profile, like how much, if there's an issue with insulin and blood sugar, people oftentimes will feel really fatigued after certain meals, or they may feel more sleepy after a certain meal, like a carbohydrate-rich meal, which might indicate that their blood sugar is a little unstable, that their insulin levels might be not quite optimal. So we work with that kind of information as well. And then noticing, did you have a bowel movement every day on a daily basis? Was it easy to have that bowel movement? And then like I was mentioning, any undigested food, anything else that's notable that might give us a clue as to what's happening with the microbiome.
Amazing. Well, I feel like we've learned a lot so far, and you're going to be speaking to us on Thursday, going a little deeper into all of this. Now that we've kind of understand the ecosystem, I have a picture in my mind of sort of what's going on with the gut. You're going to tell us about the effect of stress, and then some actual apps, some techie stuff we can use to maybe regulate stress and have our digestive system working as optimally as possible. Before we close out for today and we let you go, I'd love for you to just tell us a tiny bit more about your time on the reservation and any of the traditions or things that you saw there happening with the people and the community that tied into your work as the doctor. I mean, I know you mentioned the ceremony for the woman with cancer. What did that actually look like? Like, what were they doing, and were they singing, or was there dancing, or?
Yeah, singing, dancing, a big bonfire in the middle, costumes, and then lots of people just clapping and chanting along with the singing. It was pretty amazing. And a lot of times the community would go see the medicine man and before they would come to our clinic. So I remember seeing an older lady who had a rash on her legs, and when she came in, her daughter was translating for her and telling me, she has this really itchy rash and it's red. And when I'm looking at her legs, she has this sort of black sheen on her legs. And so I'm asking, like, I don't see any redness. He said, we were in the medicine man yesterday and he put ash on the rash to help to clear it up. So it's not as red as it had been. That was just the treatment that he was providing for them. So it was just fascinating because there was this combination of still sort of, we do the traditional healing first. And then if we need to come in to see the Western doctors with their medications and stuff, then we come back in. And so again, sort of infusing and going along the path of what I was always interested in was learning more about different tools that you have. I mean, these are all, now we're starting to just on the tip of understanding some of the bioenergetics of the body. And that is where acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine has been doing for 5,000 years. And we're just barely starting to understand some of these things that were being done so long ago.
Sivana friends, join us again on Thursday, where we're going to go deeper with Mona. We're going to talk about the effect that stress has on our digestive tract and actually learn actionable steps that we can take right now to solve common digestive problems. We do a kind of lightning round where I ask her some, I think, good questions. We cover like, are probiotics really worth taking? What to do if your stool is loose or too firm, or you suffer from constipation or IBS. We also talk about why you might want to meditate before you eat, and she shares with us her favorite apps and wearable devices that can help us decrease our stress and increase our digestive health. So that's on Thursday. I hope to connect with you then. Have a beautiful day full of yoga, meditation, and be sure to be mindful about what you eat as well. From my heart to yours, namaste.
You've been listening to the Sivana podcast. To find out more about Sivana, go to SivanaSpirit.com or follow Sivana on Facebook at Facebook.com/Sivana Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at SivanaEast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode, and thank you for listening to the Sivana podcast.